When I graduated from St. Andrew's Scott School, it's an IB school in Argentina, there was this voice in my head that kept on repeating itself and saying, do with your life whatever it is that you want, just please don't suck at it. And I'm not sure, for those of you who have worked with the IB, so I don't know if you can relate, but I'm not sure if that voice belonged to my teachers, the school, my parents, or if it was the result of exhaustion after having to take the IB exams and writing the extended essay. But when I moved to New York City a couple months later and I was able to distance myself from high school enough to fully appreciate every aspect of it, I realized that the voice or voices had in fact been saying all along, feel the freedom to choose the path in life that will make you the happiest and know that you have been given the tools with which to succeed on it. Now, this is a very different message because it forces you to reevaluate how you measure success as a 16, 17, or 18-year-old. In my case, it was a realization for somebody coming from a society in which success at that age seemed to be measured by whether or not you became an attorney, doctor, an engineer, or a business person. So when I moved to New York City in 2002, a year in which only 38% of students graduated high school, I decided to pursue a career in arts education. And by arts education, I don't just mean the education of specific art forms like music, dance, and theater, but almost as importantly, their integration to core area subjects. So, for example, using theater to enhance a history course, or using music to enhance a math course, using visual arts to enhance a biology course. These are things that excited me about education and the future of education. I basically decided, and I can't believe I'm about to say this in front of so many people, but I decided that I wanted to do for education what Johnny Depp had done for pirates. I wanted to take a failing system and make it appealing, attractive, and in a non-sexual way sexy again. So when I was in New York, I started taking courses. Well, hang on, let's take a minute. Let's really explore this connection between myself and Johnny Depp for a minute. When I was in New York, I started taking courses in the program in educational theater at NYU, and I immediately auditioned to be a founding member of New York City's only Shakespeare educational touring troupe. I was really hungry for performance opportunities, and I wanted to go into schools and work with kids. So you can imagine how excited I was when I got accepted into this company. You might also be able to imagine how quickly that excitement faded when I found out that rehearsals took place on Saturdays at 8 a.m. But it was an honor, and I wasn't about to turn it down. I'm a firm believer that we only ever truly learn from our mistakes. So I have no problem in admitting to you people that I was a horrible company member. I sucked. It was horrible. I was lousy. I would show up late, if at all, and when I did, I was in no conditions to be rehearsing Shakespeare. Because let's face it, being focused at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning is hard enough. Being in a room with people speaking a 400-year-old language, that's insane. But I was too proud to quit, and the directors of the program, Vincent and Zach, would not fire me, even though sometimes I really wish they had. But instead, one Saturday morning rehearsal, to which I assume I was late, one of them took me over to a trunk full of props, and in what I can only imagine was pure frustration, he buried his arm in the trunk and randomly pulled out a pirate hat. And inside the pirate hat was an eye patch and a hook. And he looked at me and he said, "You're going to play the pirate. And you're going to be in every single scene of this play." Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with The Taming of the Shrew, of all the amazing characters that Shakespeare created for that play, a pirate was not really one of them. So there I was, a pirate with no lines, no apparent reason to exist in the world of this play. And all I had was a hat, an eye patch, and a hook, and a whole bunch of yars and ha-ha-has to use at my disposal over the course of this 75-minute adaptation. Just to give you an idea of how ridiculous this is, imagine, if you will, Act 5, Scene 2. Scene, Padua, Italy, in Lucentio's house. The stage directions read, enter Baptista, Vincentio, Gremio, the pedant, Lucentio, and Bianca, Petruchio, Kate, Hortensio, Tranio, Biondello, Grumio, and the widow. The serving men with Tranio bring in the banquet. Notice how at no point does it say the pirate remains on stage from the previous scene. Later in that scene, Kate proceeds to deliver one of Shakespeare's most quoted female monologues, and she finishes it by saying, "Then veil your stomachs, for it is no boot, and place your hands below your husband's foot. In token of which duty, if he please, my hand is ready, may it do him ease." There's a beat, and then Petruchio responds by saying, "Why, there's a wench, come on and kiss me, Kate." Now, usually amongst a cast of characters, there's a big response. But imagine, if you will, amongst the response of these well-crafted characters, you hear, "Yar!" It was ridiculous, and this is how I felt for weeks. But this is what would happen. I would roll out of bed, I would go to rehearsal half asleep, I would pick up my props, I would go to my place on stage, and I would just sit there. And in the middle of rehearsal, the director would cut the rehearsal, and he would stop the action, but not because Kate or Petruchio had missed a line, not because Hortensio missed a cue, but because the pirate was not reacting. And he would look at me and he would say, "React. You need to physically and vocally react with what's going on stage." And so I would, and people would laugh, as you are now, and I would feel embarrassed, and but you know what? I guess I deserved it, because I was never on time. But no amount of rehearsal would ever prepare me for the first performance in front of a middle school. We were on our way to the middle school, and I was walking along, and I had my fingers crossed in my pocket, much as I do now, and I was hoping that either Zach or Vincent walk up to me and say, "Listen, Alex, the whole pirate thing, it was a joke. It was a lesson that you had to learn, and I'm glad that you learned it, but just drop it." But that didn't happen. So I got to the school, and while all my fellow actors are putting on their period costumes and going over lines, I am making sure that my black outfit looks okay, and that my $2 pirate hat from Party City looks like anything but a $2 pirate hat from Party City. But it was, in fact, a $2 pirate hat from Party City, and I couldn't do anything about it. So for those of you who've been in shows, you know what happened next. We all went backstage, we held hands, we stood in a circle, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. And we all talked about how amazing we were and the awesome job that we had done and how proud we should be of this moment. Yeah. And then the show started. And I remember sitting on stage, and I probably shouldn't be admitting this to you because it's unprofessional if you're an actor, but I'm sitting on stage, and I'm looking out of the corner of the one eye I have available to me, and I'm looking out into the audience, and I see 90% of the kids are looking at me. Instead of looking at the real characters on stage for what was probably the most pivotal scene in the play. And I kid you not, this happened for probably the entire length of the play. Just kids looking at me and laughing. My next memory is sitting on stage with the actors and the director, and we're having a talkback session with the students and their teachers. And you could tell that the student questions had been, they had been pre-approved and planted, and they had been polished for politeness. But something that was a little harder to pick up on at the time was this growing sense of anger amongst the adults. And it wasn't until 10 minutes into the Q&A when the teacher finally said, "Where do you people get off lying to our students and making a mockery of classical theater?" I mean, understandably so. And one at a time, the adults raised their hands and shared their concern about this, and one at a time, the aggression was directed at me. There wasn't a pirate in the Taming of the Shrew. Why are you guys misrepresenting what happened, and why are you butchering Shakespeare, and so on and so forth? And this happened for a while. And what I wanted to do, I just wanted to crawl under a rock and cry. Instead, I just closed my eyes, and the first image that popped into my head were the kids that were looking at me during the show. And I realized they weren't looking at me in disgust or in anger the way that the adults were now. They were looking at me in anticipation. They were looking at the pirate to help make sense of the play. And I realized that by looking at the pirate, they were looking at the show through his eyes. And if the pirate understood what was going on, that gave them a channel to understand along with them. So I realized, I mean, it had nothing to do with me, but I realized that the pirate had inadvertently gone from being the biggest mistake I'd ever made to this educational tool that was bridging the massive gap between 400-year-old dramatic literature and 12-year-olds. So once I made this realization, once it clicked in my mind, I gained all the courage I could. I took off my eye patch, I looked at the teacher, and I said, "You should be thanking the pirate." You should be thanking the pirate because the pirate creatively contextualized concepts that your students may have otherwise not have understood. Now I'm going to repeat that phrase because it's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. The pirate creatively contextualized concepts. Now this phrase is important to me and the work that I do, and I'll unpack it and I'll try to figure out why. But right now, there's a global trend in education in which curriculum design is moving away from fact-based curriculum into a concept-based curriculum. Meaning, for example, that in the near future, students might no longer learn about the Holocaust in the way that they do now. In order to learn about the Holocaust, maybe in the future you might have to learn about the concept of empathy first, and then about the Holocaust. So I'd like to talk about this example of using empathy as an in to discussing the Holocaust. When students understand what empathy means to them in the context of their own lives, once they figure out where they can find it and where they can't and why not, then that's when they can use this lens to create meaningful and engaging connections to historical context, like in this case, the Holocaust. Now, this is an exciting educational model, but it'll create a lot of, it'll be challenging, and it'll be creating a lot of new gaps. And in education, we love talking about gaps and what we're going to do to bridge them. But in this case, the gap that we need to look out for is the gap between themes and their practical applications. So in this case, the distance between empathy and the Holocaust. And the more, it's ironic because the more abstractual the curriculum is, the further away it'll be from the realities to which it can be applied. But this is also what's so exciting about education is that soon education will take place in that gray area between ideas and reality. And you might be wondering right now, what happened to the pirate? What does creativity have to do with any of this? Creativity needs to be at the center of this process. Because the reality is, we don't know what realities are out there for today's students. A generation ago, students were being welcomed into a much more secure and a much more secure world. But the last time I checked, the definition, the very basic definition of education still reads, the process of preparing oneself and others for a mature life. The very basic definition. So my question is, how do we prepare students for a mature life in the 21st century when we have economic and social models that are threatening the way we live, whether it's an economic crisis or gay bullying? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't think there is an answer. But what I do know is that students in this room today have to create an answer. And that's why creativity is so important. And that's why we need to acknowledge the importance of creativity. But in order to do that, we need to first find creativity because it's getting harder and harder to find. Now, in 99% of the schools that I visit, creativity can be found mostly in the auditorium, the music room, and the art room, if a school is honestly lucky enough to have them. Otherwise, we're talking about cafeterias and hallways. And those are the most dangerous and insecure places in a school these days. So you might be asking, well, what can I do to contribute to this? This is all very abstract. What can I do to contribute to this? Well, next time somebody wants to cut the drama program, next time somebody wants to discontinue the after-school arts program or fire the music teacher, we need to say no. And we need to say no. We can say no for a variety of reasons, including some research that's out there that proves that if a student takes 4 years of arts instruction, their scores, their SAT scores, are 58 points above average for verbal and 38 points above average for math. So there's research out there that proves this. But we need to say no, not because we want our children to be artists, but because we want to provide them with the tools with which to succeed on whatever path it is they choose. And believe it or not, creativity needs to be at the forefront of that toolbox, now more than ever in a very, very big way. And while, yes, I'm sure the world still needs the Mick Jaggers, the Marilyn Monroes, the Pablo Picassos, and the Justin Biebers, we need, more than anything, we need creative economists, creative doctors, creative politicians, and creative educators. So I'd like to do a little test right now. Raise your hand if you consider yourself to be a somewhat smart, reasonably smart person. Now, keep your hand up if you consider yourself to be a creative person. Now, for those of you that lowered your hand, please raise them back up again, because it's really important to figure out that creativity and originality are at the forefront of intelligence. You can lower your hands, thank you. And to those of you who kept your hand up, I hope that you understand what I'm talking about, and I hope that you continue to make these connections between creativity and intelligence, between the knowledge you acquire today and the way in which you choose to practice it tomorrow in the world that will be a mystery. So, my point, I guess, in being here today is saying that everybody in this room can be a pirate. It's coming full circle. Yeah. Everybody in this room can be a pirate. Everybody in this room has the capacity to creatively contextualize concepts for people that may otherwise not know how. And as a future generation of artists, as a future generation of business leaders, parents, and more importantly, educators, we have a responsibility to ourselves to tell those around us, listen, man, I have no idea what your world's going to look like, but here are the tools with which you can survive, create, and excel in it, regardless of what path or profession you choose. And if that toolbox has creativity at the forefront of it, I promise that we will be taking a million steps towards creating a better world through education. Thank you very much.